Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And specifically, I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on a wonderful multi-disc Blu-ray set which was released by Criterion earlier this year, collectively designated at spine number 1203, and it is this set. Chantal Akerman Masterpieces 1968 to 1978. And as some of you know, we have been going through the films in order as they emerge and appear in this brilliant set. And that brings us, therefore, to a work which is described as being from the year 1975, and the filmmaker is Chantal Akerman, and the name of the work is Je, tu, il, elle. This is the work, the utterly extraordinary, epic film. It's epic in its scope. It's also epic in its sense of raw, intense intimacy in a way that Chantal Akerman, the writer-director of this work, can do. The writer-director, filmmaker, artist extraordinaire, Chantal Akerman's masterpiece from 1975. And it features Chantal Akerman and Niels Erstrup and Claire Waltion. And among those persons who appear, perhaps the one that can be said to be the most prominent in terms of most running time and most how long the person appears on screen is the character portrayed by Chantal Akerman, the one, the only Chantal Akerman, in this amazing epic film. This is the work which is Je, tu, il, elle, which I understand can be translated into English as I, you, he, she. Je, tu, il, elle. This film is an extraordinary feat, and it is a film that is, I think, filled with so much intimacy and heart and emotion and passion. There are very direct passages. There are very intimate, direct passages of discussions and discussion points. There are moments of raw emotion. There are moments of intimacy to the point of total and utter vulnerability, but that is also a possible gateway or linkage to the possibility of connection in this humane way that Chantal Akerman and her camera and her eye, her cinema eye, is giving towards the proceedings here in this wonderfully welcoming and so personal way. This is an utterly personal film, and we as viewers, or I as a viewer, as I watch this, feel like she is sharing so much of the story of these characters with us in a way that is incredibly liberating and also very honest and pure, and thus very filled with a lot of emotion. There are passages of sex and sexuality that are, on the one hand, quite graphic and quite perhaps in that way might not necessarily be for all audiences, that's for sure. However, if one is okay with passages of sexuality and nudity, these moments do highlight a very tender and very emotionally emotionally riveting moment or moments between human beings that I think has its own power and its own sexual energy, and also its a sense of sort of the portrayal of in a humane way, the portrayal of the soul or the souls. So it is an incredible discussion point. Again, it is very intense, very, very intense work. So, in that way, it may not necessarily be for all audiences. So, please be mindful of this. But if you're okay with these passages of intense emotional feeling that is expressed in certain scenes of sex and sexuality, frank discussions of sexual acts, etc. Then, and if you're okay with that kind of discussion and that type of approach and aesthetic to cinema, then this film Je tu il elle is therefore, I think, a great place to visit in terms of the Akerman cinema journey. It is an incredibly important work in the body of work of Chantal Akerman as a filmmaker and artist. And in many ways, it can be said to be a summation of a lot of the points and themes and concerns that we have seen build up throughout her brilliant filmography up to this point, from 1968 up to now, 1975. And so we might have a sense of certain passages or certain quotes even, or certain similarities that we might find, say, with earlier works like La Chambre or Saute ma ville or L'Enfant aimé ou Je joue à être une femme mariée, Hotel Monterey, etc. And then at the same time, it seems to be forging new and innovative ground, cinema ground, and taking us, the viewers, on a journey of sorts, of journeys, because there are many different complex journeys that are taking place, one can say, within the bounds of this work. I should say, too, that it is approximately, in terms of its running time, 86 minutes, so it is regarded as being the first feature film or feature-length film of Chantal Akerman. Also as guided by a number of things that you can find in the supplements, which we'll talk a little bit about later, as well as the information found in the great booklet that accompanies this wonderful Criterion set. One can glean from certain clues or certain hints that are given to us about considering this as a type of narrative feature film. There may be I think, a reasonable temptation to interpret certain passages, or indeed maybe significant portions of the film, from the context of maybe a type of quasi-autobiographical or maybe quasi-documentary type of way, in terms of borrowing from quote-unquote real life, end quote. But and I think that's a very reasonable interpretation that one can have. However, there are also, as we've seen throughout the body of work of Chantal Akerman, the possibility of seeing her works through multiple different and sometimes even seemingly contradictory interpretations, but all at once at the same time. Thus, going back to the initial question, one can also regard this film as a narrative or feature film, in a manner of speaking, with regard to, say, Chantal Akerman and the character of Julie, for instance. So let us therefore proceed, my dear friends, with a discussion or a approach to this film in terms of the plot or story structure. And I think what is quite remarkable is that we've already seen throughout the body of work of Akerman how she has a certain rigor, a brilliant, say, artistic styling about the way in which she employs a certain style or stylistic motif, but in a way that is not alienating, but rather in a curious yet genius way, totally inviting. And I think here, Je tu il elle informs the same or similar type of thought process in terms of a cinematic styling or the application of a type of structure to this work. So we can say that it is divided into three separate, distinct portions or sections that also are interconnected. One way that they are interconnected is the appearance of the Chantal Akerman character. And so the first section can be classified or can be described as being Chantal Akerman's character being alone in a house or a sort of residential building or place, which seems to have a large set of windows in a fairly large room. There is a bed or a mattress. There's also a furniture that gradually seems to be dwindling out of the picture. We also get some semblance of the Chantal Akerman character maybe writing something that is described through voiceover narration as being a letter of many pages, quite voluminous, writing about something we're not quite privy to the specific subject matter of the writing itself or the letter itself, but there may be something to it in terms of a type of cathartic act of writing about something that we might reasonably assume or interpret that has maybe happened to this character quite recently, leading up to the very start of this film, or this particular first section, Chantal Akerman's character in this house or in these rooms. And we also get a discussion through the voiceover narration about her attempt at, say, dealing with the furniture, painting and repainting the walls a different color, the days that are passing, things that she does on, say, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, and then also giving us a total amount of days based on the voiceover narration that she is there. At least that is what is indicated to us in the voiceover narration. But as we hear the voiceover narration, we do get shots of Chantal Akerman's character. Sometimes we see her writing, sometimes we see her eating out of a bag, which we understand through the voiceover narration is very light, is sugar out of a bag with a spoon. Sometimes it spills over, and then there are many pages as well of the letter in question, and the furniture seems to be dwindling such that something that is once there as a bed ends up being a mattress a few shots later within the same sequence, etc. There are also moments of Chantal Akerman's character. Her physical appearance is also figured very prominently in terms of the framing and also in terms of Chantal Akerman's performance and the interaction within the cinema space. And this involves modes of, say, physicality and the human body, and in sometimes states of nudity and undress. And this, I think, creates a very interesting dialogue of space and intimacy that is existing between, say, the viewer on the one hand and then the subject of the film on the other. And so already I think we have within the structure a very fascinating example of the use of geometric spaces within an interior, a la previous films like Hotel Monterey or La Chambre. We also have a type of voiceover narration that may or may not always be in sync with what it is we are seeing on camera, that Chantal Akerman herself is acting out in a way. Sometimes we hear the dialogue or the voiceover narration refer to something that seems to be in line with what we're seeing, the sugar out of the bag, the writing of the letter. Other times there might be instances where she's talking about maybe some kind of activity about decorating and redecorating the room, but we don't necessarily see it, like the painting of the walls, for instance. We don't necessarily see that. And those are clues or hints about the possibility of maybe what we are hearing could be completely in line with what we are seeing, or it could be completely disjointed from what we are seeing. That's also very reminiscent of an earlier work that's also in the set, Le 15 where we had a young woman in that work, and the voiceover narration of her in English in a very interesting tone of voice that was not always in sync with what we were seeing play itself out in the visual medium. So that type of interplay between the voiceover narration and what we are seeing creates this interesting connect and disconnect, which I think lends itself really wonderfully to the possible, say, psychological based interpretation that a viewer can have of the Chantal Akerman character here. And namely, is this some kind of hurt or pain that she is maybe trying to recover from. Maybe is some kind of emotional hurt or feeling or breakup or damage or some kind of disappointment that might have occurred, thus uh, uh, compelling her perhaps to be isolated, to not leave the contours of the interior space but stay within. Sometimes she looks out the window, maybe remarks about the weather, remarks about the snow. Sometimes she is on the bed, or the mattress, and sometimes she's there in a state of undress, and uh, uh, her body is partially covered with a blanket or some towel of some sort or covering, but other times it may not be. So there are moments of, I think, raw, intense intimacy. And Chantal Akerman is front and center in that discussion of raw, intense intimacy, which I think is very brave and very bold. And it shows kind of it shows a kind of devotion to cinema, which I think is incredibly admirable and very beautiful. And it's also an interesting point of attention to make as well, which is that, I mean, I mentioned the idea of perhaps the possible interpretation of the disjointing, the disconnect between what we hear and what we see, but that doesn't make it, I think, any less alienating in terms of the isolation effect. But I think, on the contrary, there's a great contradiction that's happening. There's an empty space, or relatively speaking, wide spaces in the empty house, except save for the appearance of Chantal Akerman and certain objects here. And she's engaged in certain rituals that could themselves be a kind of therapeutic action, not necessarily destructive. I mean, when we remember a work like Saute ma vie from the early part of Chantal Akerman's filmography, one can say that the ritual aspects of the activities of her in the apartment in Saute ma vie could have had a very destructive bent to them. Whereas here in Je suis ELLE, one can say there may be a kind of humanistic, therapeutic, almost emotional detox type of connotation to what we are seeing within the first part of this film, thus making, I think, for a very a very, very thought-provoking first chapter of this work. That is, again, interior and indoors. There might therefore be the temptation of interpreting that in terms of oppression, but on the contrary, I think there is a certain degree of liberation or freedom, of a type of self-expression that is going on here. I mean, there's so much self-expression that's going on here. I mean, it's shown through the letter, but it's also shown through the actual being and the very human fiber that is the character and soul of the great Chantal Akerman, who is right here front and center in this film. So rather than consider the interior spaces here as a kind of oppressive nature, there is a kind of inward inspection that is highlighted, or maybe metaphorically highlighted, thus I think making for a very inward examination that is itself quite liberating, or potentially so anyway. Filled with a lot of questions and a lot of doubt, perhaps. That's for sure. I mean, there's also the sense of maybe the lingering disappointment of something that may or may not have happened prior to the events of the film that we see, but we can always assume something is going on. And I think those assumptions might also be helped further by what we see in the separate sections, the next two sections of the film. So we can go to the next section of the film, which is, I think, could be described as a road movie. Chantal Akerman's character takes a sudden break from the indoors and goes outdoors to hitchhike in the expanse of the busy, the hustle and bustle of the highways, and thus is picked up by a truck driver And so we have this second part as a kind of road movie where Chantal Akerman's character is almost like a silent observer or a companion to the truck driver character. This man who picks her up, and there are scenes where they are sitting together, eating a meal, in a fairly empty restaurant, or maybe they're going to a bar, or they are together. And then there are moments of very raw and intense and frank depictions or discussions or references to sexuality and sexual acts. And so there is this idea, perhaps, of whether or not one can say that there is a quote unquote authentic emotional connection to be had between these two, the truck driver on the one hand, the man on the one hand, and Chantal Akerman's character on the other, or whether this is smoke and mirrors. Maybe this is something that is bereft of any kind of hope of an authentic connection. We might get certain clues in one direction. We also might get clues in another direction. I mean, that ambivalence and the possibility of a multitude of even seemingly contradictory interpretations. We've mentioned this before. It is completely possible in the realm of Chantal Akerman's film. Her cinema philosophy and aesthetic, and it's definitely true, for instance, in the second section of the work, whether there is the semblance or the hollow nature of the connection, or is there something that is intimate and something that's there. And perhaps one can take certain clues from, say, the dialogue passages that are occurring. We do get dialogue that is spoken, but from the man and from his point of view, and also some of his background and his life and his past life and his past intimate relationships, family life, discussions of sex and the like, where we also get Chantal Akerman as I mentioned, a silent companion or silent listener, which is very reminiscent of an earlier work which is called L'Enfant aimé, où je joue à être une femme mariée, where we had Chantal Akerman appear there, but was there as a type of silent companion, listening to the words of the woman that was there, who's portrayed Claire Wattion in that film as well. So it's fascinating in terms of the act of listening that is also very much part of the world of Chantal Akerman, and maybe the act of listening, silent as Chantal Akerman is throughout this passage of the film, is that silence a kind of, say, commentary on the lack of an emotional connection between these two in this particular passage, or is there something of an innately humane act that is going on by virtue of listening to the what we can assume is sort of the deep thoughts, the real stuff that this man is thinking about. You know, maybe also how sex and the sexual act might be said to be releasing certain maybe blocks of freedom from him, and thus upon the sexual act and the sort of orgasmic feeling, then there might be the ability to, in an emotional and very maybe honest way, at least for him, release certain thoughts and feelings that he has as well. So, and then Chantal Akerman in that activity might be said to be engaging in a very thoughtful, active, sort of humane listening, or it could be the other way, a kind of cynical approach to that. The fact that Chantal Akerman is a silent observer or listener could be said to be somewhat passive or forced into doing things that maybe her character really doesn't want to do. There might be something of a negative connotation there, and that idea of forced oppression, doing the Chantal Akerman character seen to be doing things under the command and control of this man, the truck driver. So that type of ambivalence of interpretation, I think, is very real and very direct and very much there in this passage, in particular of Je tu il elle, and very important as well to keep that in mind. So, and that makes it very raw and very powerful and thought-provoking to its very core. And then we have the third passage of the film, which can be said to be one of another form of perhaps intimate liberation on the one hand, or maybe another sense of ambivalence enters the picture, and we can interpret it in a multitude of ways. But here we have the arrival at a certain place or apartment. We have a wonderful scene involving Chantal Akerman in an elevator. It reminds me of all the times we have seen and we will see perhaps characters in elevators or cameras in elevators, and look at the face of Chantal Akerman as she's riding this elevator. I mean, it's fascinating to look at the face and the visage of her up to this point, almost bereft of a type of smile on the one hand, but when she enters this new place that we haven't been to up to now, and we see another woman. This is the woman portrayed by Claire Waltion, and there is some kind of relationship that some kind of past between these two. They definitely know each other. And there is also already too a sense of resistance from this other woman. Maybe it's playful, maybe it's in jest, but maybe it's very serious and maybe trying to push away the Chantal Akerman character. But there is also the attempt and bridge of a very sensual intimacy that is then leading to one of the most beautiful and one of the most direct and very intense and emotional and sexual and sensual passages of this work involving these two women and their intimacy with each other. It is a very brave scene and composed of a series of shots in various forms of physical acts of sex and sexual intimacy between these two women. And in that way, we have, I think, a very type of it's a it's so beautiful in its honesty. There is the way in which the kind of raw intensity of the sex act or the sex acts are shown in a way that the people there, the two women, they are totally free and totally liberated, such that they seem to be acting in a way that is totally and 100% towards what it is they want, their will, their free will. Note too the smile and the laughter, especially on the face of Chantal Akerman, and who up to now we have not seen so many smiles and laughs, but now we do. And so that type of liberating effect is itself very beautiful during or in the midst of this having sex and making love with this other woman that we meet. And the same can be true of the other woman and her expression as well. The passage of her and Chantal Akerman just before the lovemaking could be said to have been very stern. Maybe there was a distance that she was trying to apply, but then when they go into this moment of intimacy, there is also this liberating sense about her as well, and her face, and she is laughing and she is smiling, and they are looking at each other and they are regarding each other, and it's also making them individually feel liberated and feel satisfaction physically and emotionally, which is quite a beautiful thing that is occurring. Very intimate, very sensual and passionate, and very much alive in the moment, which I admire very much in the cinema, Chantal Akerman cinema. It's very bold and very brave, incredibly brave, And the fact that Chantal Akerman herself is putting herself out there in this way that is incredibly vulnerable is yeah, it's remarkable, incredibly remarkable. So this is a tour de force film that is, I think, giving us moments of honesty and a sense of truth on the one hand, but also uh, letting us question and wonder and ponder as to the optimism or cynicism of various passages of the work. Also question and ponder the quote unquote authenticity or the narrative structure of the film. I mean, the idea of the character of Julie rather than Chantal, for example, or the idea of the structure of the film where the characters are talking with the camera, but they don't acknowledge the presence of the camera, at least during some of the sections of the film. But there are other sections, in particular the first section, where the camera seems to be acknowledged, where looks into the camera sometimes occur. The idea thus resurrecting itself, the idea of the gaze and the importance of the gaze and the look in the world of Chantal Akerman's cinema. One can say, however, that the gaze in this way could be one from the viewer to the world of the film, thus maybe creating a sense of closeness that might be too close for comfort. There is a sense of maybe discomfort on the part of the viewer. Are we watching too much, or are we privy to scenes that are so intimate and so personal that maybe we have no right to be there? But even if we might feel that way, Chantal Akerman cinema allows us, invites us into this world, permits us into glimpses into the mindscape and the psychological scape and the physical as well as the emotional in this work. Brave, incredible, epic, extraordinary, and also it has a sense of the directness that I admire oh so very much indeed. Je tu il elle is an extraordinary, dynamic work of art. Once again, there are, as I mentioned before, scenes and frank discussions of sexuality and nudity that won't be for everyone. It won't be for everyone. So if it's not for you, again, not a problem at all. Don't worry about it in the slightest. You know that it doesn't. No, you don't have to. I mean, not the film is not going to be for everyone. So that's totally okay. But once again, for those who are interested in a furtherance of the Ackerman cinema journey and discussions and depictions of sexuality in a raw and intimate and passionate way, and very direct and honest way. In instances like this, which also invite certain maybe parallel and multiple and contradictory interpretations as to the meaning. If that is okay with you, then this is certainly a film that is not just highly recommended, but is I think can be regarded by many, certainly by me, as being one of the very greats of Chantal Akerman's filmography and her output of art. This is the extraordinary work, which is Je, tu, il, elle. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Je, tu, il, elle, or should I say re-released this film, Je, tu, il, elle, this time in the context of this wonderful Blu-ray set, again released earlier this year, 2024, Chantal Akerman Masterpieces, 1968 to 1978. The film Je, tu, il, elle can be found as one of the works located on Blu-ray disc number 1. And in fact, I have Blu-ray disc number 1 in the player right now. I apologize, I've blocked off the actual screen right now because the Blu-ray disc menu is a montage of moving images from various works of Chantal Akerman that are included in this set. So I don't want to offend the YouTube god. So just in case, I've just blocked that. I hope you can forgive me for this point of editing, but I hope you can understand. But I do have Blu-ray disc number 1 in here, and among the films that we can select is Je, tu, il, elle. I should also point out, as I've mentioned before, there is a separate section on Blu-ray disc number 1 for supplements, which we will talk about themselves in a separate video discussion where we touch also on other parts of the release overall, the packaging and the comprehensive essay, etc. But um, some of the films, not all of the films, some of the films, when you select them, they will have then their own little submenu, which will then give you the option of maybe audio option choices, subtitle choices, or the like. Sometimes there won't be any option, but other times there will. And then also there might be the option of watching a film-specific supplement. We didn't see them for all the films in Blu-ray disc number one, but for instance, when we spoke about Saute Ma Ville, if you recall, when we press Saute Ma Ville on the Blu-ray disc menu here, that actually takes us to a sub-menu where we can either select to watch the film, or we can watch a little Saute Ma Ville specific supplement, which was an introduction by the filmmaker Chantal Akerman, which was about a minute or so, if I remember correctly. It's not true for all the films. Not all the films have their own film-specific supplements, but Je tu ELLE does. And so when I press Je tu ELLE on the main Blu-ray menu, it actually takes me to a sub-menu. And I can select the movies, I can select chapters, and also I can select something called Under the Influence. Ira Sachs. This is a 9-minute discussion with Ira Sachs. Let me just press it here just to read what it says, and I quote, "In this 2019 installment of the Criterion Channel series Under the Influence, filmmaker Ira Sachs discusses the place that Chantal Akerman's provocative movie occupies in his personal canon and analyzes the minimalist, durational style that she achieved with her first feature-length work." Ira Sachs, the filmmaker and artist, is talking about how this film affected him. He mentions about how he watched it the first time. He didn't quite connect with it the first time, as he acknowledges, but then when he watched it a second time, he really connected with it, and therefore he calls it magnificent, canonical, life-changing, life-affirming. He also talks about it from his own subjective personal experience, and also his own life and his own feelings as well, and in the context of many things. For instance, in the context of sexuality, in the context of his own feelings and his own viewpoints and his own emotions, and his identity, and as a gay man and also as an artist who deals with themes of gay characters and the intimacy, the beautiful intimacy that is expressed between gay characters, and done in a way that is very intense and very emotional and very, very passionate and beautiful. And so he acknowledges the wonderful bravery and boldness of Chantal Akerman in certain specific scenes of frank and quite directly depicted sexuality between lovers, between people who are intimate, two women. And so he does call it, Ira Sachs does at one point calls this perhaps a type of gay rights movie, in a sense that from his perspective it does show this lens of beauty and a very lovely, warm, intimate way in which this film is liberating. And so it has a transparency that is so direct and so honest. To have influenced his own work as well in certain respects. So, in a lot of respects, as he acknowledges. So, his discussions here, Ira Sachs's discussions, and he does go to, in a way, about talking about the structure of the film in a way that's much better than I have tried to do so in my discussion. But he does it in a way that is very succinct and very direct and to the point, but also so in a tone that's very warm and welcoming. And you know that he really loves this film and he admires this film. And I love this way too. He talks about the format and style of this work. It's sometimes the use of the word minimalist. It's used in the Criterion submenu description here, for example. The use of time and space, the temporal nature of this, the passage of time. Sometimes we hear the phrase on the 5th day, on the 6th day. 28 days is mentioned, although we don't really get a sense of that in terms of visual terms, but we hear it. So we get a sense of, or we are told that time is passing, but is it really passing or not? There are these questions of duration and temporal space, as well as the physical space that he mentions here. The idea of the interior spaces that might suggest oppression on the one hand, but they seem so spacious and so large on the inside, so as to perhaps suggest a sense of liberation. Therapy, he mentions too, or maybe the idea of a psychological, maybe a psychiatrist therapy session, very important in terms of cathartic, the act of catharsis and emotional and psychological catharsis, kind of emotional detox that I mentioned earlier. These are mentioned as well. But when he talks too about the style, the cinematic style, sometimes the frame could be said to be a very quote-unquote minimalist. He says this in a way so as to remember, to remind us that it is not just about, say, the style. It's not just about the academic contours of the sort of description of the style, which are there and which are brilliantly realized and rendered, don't get me wrong, in the hands of Chantal Akerman, as Ira Sachs himself acknowledges. But what he also mentions too, which I find this is so important, and he makes it so clear, much better than I could ever hope to try to achieve. But Ira Sachs makes the great point is that Chantal Akerman is always a humanist. She is a humanist, and through her form, the cinema form, as structured as it may seem, and as wonderfully rigid as it might seem in terms of its structure, it will always still be very emotional and very inviting and very humane. This is the key word. It's humane. Chantal Akerman's cinema is humane. And it reminds me too, maybe this is a word that I should have used more when I was talking about the earlier works. But now that I hear Ira Sachs's comment about Je te ELLE, I can definitely apply that to all the other works that we have seen in the set thus far. There is a attention to the detail of the human subject, the human being that is there, and how the human being, the person, the individual is interacting, feeling, sharing their thoughts, maybe acting out things, maybe saying things that maybe they can't express otherwise. Think about Le 15, or think about La Chambre, or think about just moments of capturing something that's truly the essence. Maybe a work like Hotel Monterey, or maybe Saute ma ville, or L'Enfant aimé, où je joue à être une femme mariée, etc., etc., etc. Chantal Akerman's cinema is very humanist, which I find just a genius statement. So this discussion with Ira Sachs, it's approximately 9 minutes. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and so I'm so glad to have been able to hear this. So this is the one supplement that is tied to Je te ELLE when you go to the Je te ELLE submenu. But we have no other supplements that are tied specifically to Je te ELLE, but we do have that, and we'll talk about the other supplements from the other discs, including Blu-ray disc number 1, in a separate video discussion. So we'll save further comments about that for a later day. Before we leave Je te ELLE, I should also talk about the presentation. According to the booklet, the presentation of Je te ELLE is, first of all, I should point out that this is described as a film from 1975, 86 minutes, black and white, monaural in French with English subtitles, 1.37 to 1 aspect ratio. That's according to page 26. And then if I turn to page 42 of the booklet, it does say, it is mentioned at the top about the restorations having been undertaken by Cinematheque, a Royal Film Archive of Belgium. And it also says for Je te ELLE, the 35mm original camera negative was scanned in 2K resolution with the original monaural soundtrack remastered from a 35mm optical soundtrack positive. I should point out that Je te ELLE actually does exist in an earlier release from Criterion, which is right here. This is the Criterion Collection Eclipse series, the great DVD series, and Chantal Akerman in the 70s has a collection of Akerman works, one of which being Je te ELLE. which is right here. This is the DVD, the individual DVD that I've taken from the collection here. It's described here as being 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio for the Eclipse series DVD, so just keep that in mind, whereas here it's 1.37 to 1 as it's described in the new 2024 Blu-ray set. I have to say that the way it looks and sounds now is remarkable. It is remarkable. It's crisp, and there are moments of sharpness, some details which I never noticed prior to when I watched this particular DVD version. The DVD was great, by the way, don't get me wrong. This was the way for me to watch and re-watch and re-engage with this work for a long time. But now when I watch the film on this Blu-ray, I am so surprised by some of the detail that I maybe couldn't see before because it was a little bit darker. Now there seems to be a bit more pronouncement, some detail that I can see that I couldn't see before. I draw your attention in particular to some of the details that I could now see, say in the first section of the film, that were maybe a little bit darker for me to make out wholly when I watched the film on DVD. So that's one thing that, as an example. I mean, another thing too is I note that there is still the graininess and the grunginess of some of the scenes, especially some of the nighttime scenes, in particular with the second section between Chantal Akerman, her character, and then the truck driver character. And especially in the truck itself, there are some scenes where it's very grungy, very spotty, but the restoration preserves that spottiness, which I think is really, really great indeed. I would point out that I think to my eye, those scenes in particular in the earlier DVD also had certain scratches or certain blemishes that were very prominent as well, which I don't see in those same scenes as we see it on the Blu-ray. Personally, I think I would have liked to have seen those scratches and blemishes carried over with a bit more prominence. I draw your attention to a little detail of a scratch mark that we talked about with our discussion of the Hotel Monterey presentation part of this. Not to say that there aren't scratch marks that we see in the Blu-ray of Je tu ELLE. They are there, which I really love. It's a reminder of the 16 mm, or the film quality of this, so which is, I think, really important in terms of a kind of the roughness of it, and the sort of almost the casual nature, if you will, of a kind of fly on the wall nature, especially those scenes involving the truck driver and Chantal Akerman. I mentioned 60 millimeter. I should correct it. It's a 35 millimeter original camera negative, as I read in the booklet. So let me make that correction right now. Whew. So that is, yes, in a nutshell, my thoughts and comments on the work Je tu ELLE. There are more things to say about the other supplements and other works, as well as the set itself of Chantal Akerman, but let's leave it there. Oh, I should say too about the booklet. There is the comprehensive essay, the great essay by Beatrice Loiseau, which we will talk about in a separate video. But as well as that, there are the various write-ups of the films, and so Je tu ELLE has its own section on pages 24, 25, and 26, and 27. So it has 4 pages devoted to Je tu ELLE. Well done, bravo. It's not just a synopsis, but it's its own little mini critical essay, which is right here. It's brilliant essay, absolutely brilliant essay. And there are moments where Beatrice Loiseau makes certain references to other previous films. For instance, a reference to Hotel Monterey is very apropos and made here. There's also the idea to not just of intimacy and expressions of liberation, but also the feeling of discomfort and almost we hear the squeaks and the rustling of sheets, which might suggest to a kind of discomfort level that is also very much a reminder too of the echo or the footsteps of the woman in or the mother figure in L'Enfant aimé, ou Je joue à être une femme mariée, or maybe certain of the sounds or the voiceover that we might have heard in the echoing in Saute ma vie, etc. Or even some of the sounds and voiceover activity that we hear in the Cannes suite. But the kind of discomfort or maybe feeling maybe almost a sense of displacement that is hinted at in this essay, among other things too. So brilliant, brilliant stuff indeed. All right. I don't know what else to say. This is a work that is very important. It is incredible. It is extraordinary. And I have seen it a number of times now. And I am moved so deeply. And I am left wondering as well, hope and also disappointment as well. And there are moments where I feel perplexed. There are moments where I'm feeling I have to catch up. I have to try to figure out, put the pieces of the puzzle together myself as to the backgrounds of these characters. But at the same time, I mean, I think that's part of the joy of watching a work like this by Chantal Akerman, the kind of interplay that a viewer can have when watching this and putting the clues together, or having the film engage you and letting the film invite you in. And it is very warm, it is very inviting, and it is incredibly close. A very, very close film indeed. And it shows the extent to which Chantal Akerman, the filmmaker, artist extraordinaire, and others that she is working with here, Claire Waldillon, for instance, a very brave performance by her as well, which also echoes her performance from the earlier work, L'Enfant d'Aimé où je joue à une femme mariée, which is also itself a very brave and courageous and very direct and honest performance. But Chantal Akerman, the artist, she puts herself on the line. She puts her body on the line. She puts her heart and soul on the line to tell the story or to give this mode of cinema expression life. And she does so successfully and so earnestly and so triumphantly that I feel very privileged to have been able to have shared this experience as a viewer of this film, this remarkable work, which is called Je tue ELLE. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great films, including Je tue ELLE, including other films by Chantal Akerman, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.